Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Our Heads and Hearts, How Understanding Emotional Responses Helps Brands Support Vaccination Efforts. I'm Quirk's editor, Joe Ridholm, and before we get started, I just want to give you a few of the ways you can participate in today's discussion. You can use the chat tab to interact with other attendees, and if you'd like to ask questions of the presenters, you can use the Q&A tab to submit questions during this session, and our speakers will answer them after the presentation. Our session is presented by iSquare and Affectiva. Florian and Alex, take it away.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Happy to be here today. As Joe already said, Alex and I will be talking about how understanding emotional responses and reactions, especially to ads, can actually help brands support vaccination efforts in these times of a global pandemic. Just to quickly introduce ourselves, my name is Florian Paslik. I'm a senior research consultant here at iSquare. I've been with iSquare for about 5 years now, and my research mainly focuses on the digital lifestyle, different media channels, and how audiences perceive different media formats. Alex, to you.
And my name's Alex Duckett. I'm the Media Analytics Account Director here at Affectiva. So I help with client onboarding, client training, and yes, very much focused on understanding the underlying emotional response of viewers to different types of content.
Thanks. Just before we will get into the details of our case study and what we did, also we would like to introduce our background and who we are. We as iSquare, we are a market research company based in Berlin, but as we've been on the market for about 21 years now, we also have offices in London, New York, Hong Kong, Tokyo, also Kerala in the south of India as of recent. We are about 82 consultants with customers around the globe, about 300 and count. We do have extensive global benchmarks of the data we've been seeing in all of our studies, and we're also happy to have an US patent on our software approach for in-context testing. What we focus on with our research is essentially three main touch points. We do studies on user experience, we do shopper experience, which might be about package design testing or e-commerce testing. And for example, what I'm working on most of the times is works from the brand and media experience unit. Also, this case, we're doing video ad testing, we do TV testing, brand measurement, and comparing different media channels and their effectiveness and impact on media perception, as it was. What makes us as iSquare unique as a market research company is, first of all, we do our testing in context, which means that, as we also did for this study, we test, let's say, ads that are aimed for YouTube in a live YouTube environment to see how audiences, viewers interact with them in a context that is as natural as possible for them. Second of all, we also focus on the implicit attitudes in our research. So we're not only asking about interview data responses, but also using eye tracking measurement, emotional measurements, as we did for this study with the help of Affectiva as well, and also implicit association tests. And all this we do in a quite automated way, agile, to be integrated, for example, in customers or clients' questionnaires, and also other projects. This is also another slide talking about the different methodologies we're seeing. What we like to actually label our research work is we want to understand human experience in the digital age. How do viewers actually perceive media and the effects of their implicit perception and the explicit perception? So with the help of in-context technology, for example, eye tracking data, we want to understand why people rate spots in a different way, what do they say in focus groups, and also how we can see those differences in emotion analysis and also activation. And also we have a slide from Affectiva for Alex.
Thanks, Florian. So from the Affectiva point of view, we're an emotion AI company spun out of the MIT Media Lab over in Boston about 12 years ago. What we do is very much focus on the System 1, Type 1 responses. So understanding how viewers are implicitly feeling in each and every moment. How do we do that? Our software leverages camera technology to process facial movements, tiny facial movements over time, to then understand how viewers are feeling in each and every moment or responding to any type of experience. So as you can see in the visual on the top left of the slide there, you can see there's a whole group of people, they've sat down on TV, there's a camera device located on top that's picking up their facial features, calibrating them. A deep learning face detector is understanding where all their features are. And then as content is played, we're understanding a wide range of different emotional triggers and different emotional responses. So our tech is designed to work with any type of optical sensor, any type of device. So from your most humble, basic smartphone through to central location in theatre tests when we go back to that world. We're now in the fortunate position of having built a really, really big foundational data set. And we do talk about this at the beginning of our presentations, because this gives us a number of advantages. So it gives us a lot of contextual understanding and the ability to understand how different groups, diverse in age, gender, ethnicity, culture, that really matters in this space. So we have that breadth. And then we have depth of science as well from understanding all that. So we can train our classifiers to understand a whole range of different emotional responses. So fear, joy, surprise, anger, whatever it may be. So what we're getting to here is an unfiltered and unbiased response. So what a viewer can't say or won't say, they might not be able to articulate how they're feeling, or they might not want to because of all these other reasons. So we get all our viewers' consent, and then in as naturalistic an environment as possible, so on home, on their device, we're capturing how they're responding to different types of content. And really excited here to be with the I2 team today, because we can then connect our data, as we have done for this study, to all the behavioral, survey, attitudinal, demographic measures, so we get a much fuller, richer, full brain picture of events. Thanks, Florian.
Thanks so much, Alex. Before going into the data, we just wanted to do a quick summary of what we actually did for this study and for this case study, to give a short background on how we actually gathered the data and also why we did this. I think the background is pretty clear to everybody. We're still in the midst of a global pandemic, but we're seeing that, especially in the US, the vaccination campaign is gaining momentum, gaining traction. We've seen in the news, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago, that Joe Biden even declared the 4th of July not as the usual Independence Day, but also as the Independence Day from the coronavirus. And we're also seeing that the number of vaccinations per day in the US has been accelerating over the last weeks. So actually, it's a perfect moment in time for advertisers and also pharmaceutical brands such as Pfizer in this case, to try to even further increase the positive perception of their products, and also to let's say lend a positive context to their vaccination campaign in order to influence and to give a positive momentum to those that might still be in doubt of whether they want to get vaccinated or not. In order to show how different approaches to communication on that topic might actually be reflected in the results, we have used two very different and two very contrasting ads by Pfizer. We have the one spot, it's called Science Will Win, which is quite long actually, 70 seconds. I will present those spots in detail on the next slide. But just to give a short recap of what's happening, the Science Will Win spot is a bit more colder. It's actually more dynamic, kind of like a movie, really action-ridden, and it's focusing on the scientific advancement that has led to this vaccine. Whereas the other spot we tested, it's called Hug, is a bit shorter, and interestingly, it's only using one single shot that's focused on friends that are able to hug. To be able to hug again, which is actually one of the main things I think everybody's longing for in these days. So seeing that these are two very different approaches to communicating the vaccination efforts by Pfizer, we thought it's a perfect backdrop actually to showcase how emotion is playing an important part in those communications. I will move on to present those ads. I hope everything is working fine. We'll see the first one, Science Will Win.
When you want to save humans from disease, ask science. It will make it a breakthrough. Because science is relentless. It never gives up. It keeps asking questions until it finds what it's looking for. Science wants to cure people more than any disease wants to exist. Just ask the ones that's already eaten. But science is humble. It never rests because it has to reinvent itself every day, prove itself again and again. Until science makes the breakthrough, it isn't done. We believe science can cure every human disease, and we're going all in. Because in the end, science will win.
As I said, this is almost a movie-like ad campaign by Pfizer, which is more focused on the scientific advancement, almost kind of cold, very dynamic, and focused on the medical setting. Whereas the other ad we've tested, named HUG, is a slightly different approach. That was the more emotional approach used in HUG, with a very simple message in the end, friends being able to hug again, and then also a different approach in the video format. It's almost a POV YouTube kind of format that's focused on one camera setting. Are we going back to the slides? Just as a background on our audience and who we tested within our sample, obviously the brand was Pfizer. We tested those two different ad formats as YouTube pre-rolls, skippable, so they were be able to being skipped after 5 seconds. We embedded those two ads on the US American version of YouTube, and we are seeing pretty recent data. The fieldwork was from March 4th to March 17th, so about until a week ago. And we had about 180 participants in our sample for both spots. Quite evenly distributed across gender. We tried to represent as many age groups as possible, with most of them being from the age group 30 to 39 years. I shortly introduced the way we test ads on YouTube in the beginning, but just to showcase what we did. Participants are being invited to surf on YouTube. We are doing some screening criteria and screening questions in order to see who's able to participate in our questionnaire. And from that on, they're invited to surf on YouTube. They are able to select each and every video they would like to see. And as soon as they're selecting the first video on YouTube, they will be seeing the Pfizer ad we want to study in our approach. So, as we call it in context testing, it's a very biotic approach. It's very natural. It's a reproduction of the live YouTube site from our side, but participants are not able to see a difference. And we can actually showcase the effect those ads can have in a real world context, as it was. As I already said, we're doing this for almost all studies we're doing at iSquare, since it's the most natural way to be able to study ad contacts as they happen live on the platform. We can collect as much response data as possible, and also we can see the direct effects ad contacts on, for example, YouTube, Instagram, Amazon, Twitter, or Facebook might have on impact, on awareness, on brand image, to directly link them to the ad contact. What we did, besides classical questionnaire questions regarding brand awareness, first choice or brand image, is we also used our version of the implicit association test. We call it Brand Direct, and it's a very playful approach to that. Participants are presented a brand, in this case Pfizer, and they're asked to rate whether Pfizer is, for example, powerful, joyful, a strong company, just by clicking A or L on their keyboard. So it's a very playful approach to it, and we call it the gut feeling towards the brand, because it's not really rating the ad on a typical Likert scale or answering open questions. It's basically answering as soon as possible to understand our implicit perception of brands. And of course, what we also did was analyzing the emotional data. I'll be handing over to Alex for that.
Yeah, so from the Affectiva side, we leveraged the camera on a viewer's device and then sought to process their facial expressions moment by moment through that, aggregated them all together so we can get an understanding of the breadth and depth of their different emotions across a range of different emotional feelings, and we're gonna draw out the specific ones of interest later. So why would you do that? It can help you pinpoint emotional highlights, and then combined with the I-square data, we can then also start to see, okay, so how do you drive people to say get vaccinated, or look at different triggers by different types of demographic subgroup, or where they skipped at a different point, what can we understand emotionally about that different audience? So we'll focus on the highlights later.
Thanks, Alex. So much for the introduction. Let's get into the results and the actual data we've been seeing. First of all, we would like to get into the actual viewer behavior on YouTube and what happened during the ad contact, because from our perspective, that always explains a lot of the data that we're seeing. First of all, we're having two metrics. We call them playback duration. So for how long has the ad been playing, and the playback share, which is setting that playback duration against the actual spot length. So what we're seeing is that the Science Will Win copy, that was the one that was more dynamic, more focused on scientific advancement, was actually played for about half a minute, which is quite a long duration in itself. It shows that actually this almost cinematic approach to the ad actually captivated the user's interest and captivated it for quite a substantial amount of time, whereas the hack spot has been watched for an average of 15 seconds. However, if we set that against the ad duration, we see that the share of ad duration that's been watched is actually bigger for hack, because it's a way shorter ad. This is especially important as we will see later on that the branding Pfizer used in this ad is very limited and only limited to the ending of the spot. So it's actually better if we see a longer playback share for ad contacts. What's also important on YouTube, of course, skipping. We are seeing that most of the ads now on YouTube are being delivered as a true view format, so they're able to being skipped after 5 seconds. And what we call skip share is the amount of viewers that actually skipped this ad. We see that while maybe for Science Will Win, we saw that they, on average, it's watched for, let's say, 30 seconds. I think it was 31 seconds. We also see that 2/3 of the viewers actually skipped that ad. On average, that's after 13 seconds. And that amount is significantly lower for the hard copy. We see that only 44%, so not even half of the audience, is skipping that ad. And also, we are seeing that the hack spot is being able to it has been skipped after only 8 seconds. So while we're seeing that actually a larger share of the audience is skipping Science Will Win more often, we see for hack that's less, but after a shorter time frame, which also pinpoints to the fact that yes, Science Will Win and its more cinematic approach is actually captivating the viewers' focus and interest, maybe also attention, a bit more in the beginning. I'm seeing some questions coming up already. I would like to keep them for the end of the presentation so we can get through our slides first, and then we also reserved a space of, I think, about 10 minutes to answer all the questions that might be coming up during the presentation. That's it so far for the actual metrics we're seeing during the ad contact. And now we're moving into the questionnaire data. We have asked typical awareness questions such as, do you remember seeing this ad for the brand Pfizer, and are you familiar with the brand Pfizer? And we also asked, do you remember seeing this specific ad? And also showed the ad, obviously, again, to participants. Well, we're seeing that the brand recall and brand awareness are almost the same for both ads. We are saying that HUG, the more emotional approach, the more YouTube-like approach, has actually a significant increase in recognition of the ad again. So we're seeing that let's say the clearer context and the clearer reference to the vaccination, the anti-COVID campaign that Pfizer is actually running, makes it easier for participants to remember the ad and to actually say, oh yeah, that was the ad I was watching. What we're seeing is that the brand recall, also ad recall measures, are on the lower side, which is primarily due to a very short, very late branding for Pfizer in this case. But on the other side, we're also seeing that the brand itself, Pfizer, has a very high aided awareness. As it's very evident that in the last weeks, we've had a lot of contact to the brand on the news during the whole vaccination campaign. One of the biggest differences in ad effectiveness is what we've seen on the parameter first choice. We asked participants which of these product manufacturers would be your first choice. We presented all of the current vaccine producers that are present in the US, and we're seeing that the more emotional approach used in HUG, where we're seeing two friends being able to hug each other again, has a lot of increase for users' preference for Pfizer as a first choice, which is the first indication that this more emotional approach is also more positive and more effective for the impact and the preference for Pfizer as a brand in this case. Of course, Pfizer also wanted to change the perception of the brand to a very positive manner. And we have asked the participants to rate Pfizer along some of these metrics, like is Pfizer a likable brand? Is it a brand that you trust? Is it well known? And we're seeing a very, very consistent trend, namely that HUG, again, the more emotional approach of the two campaigns, is having a very positive effect on Pfizer as a brand. Especially, and I think those are the main metrics of concern right now, we're seeing a very, very big increase on the parameter Pfizer is committed to my well-being. We pinpoint this to the fact that actually what Pfizer is doing in that spot is actually showing a solution to the problem. We're seeing friends being able to hug each other again, and that's a very direct solution and a very direct depiction of what's going to happen if we all get vaccinated at one day. So this is actually one of the key differences we see during these two spots, across these two spots. Also, I already introduced the brand react measurement we've been doing to try to understand viewers' emotional and implicit reaction to Pfizer as a brand. We're seeing in general that Pfizer has a very strong image in general. It's positively pronounced, and especially across very important parameters such as trustworthy, correct, quality conscious, dominant, and strong. But we're also seeing that science will win, that's the light blue line in this case, isn't able to introduce Pfizer as such a young brand because it's more directed at presenting Pfizer in a way that's showing it as a strong brand, as a brand that's bringing scientific progress. And we see those two, they were also younger friends in the more YouTube-like spot. We're actually helping Pfizer to showcase themselves as a younger, maybe even fresher brand in this case. Two parameters about the ads and copies themselves we asked is overall liking. We're seeing that in general, both of these copies may have their pros and cons in terms of ad creation itself. and there's no real difference between them. But what we see, there's a significant difference in perceived brand fit. So all in all, how much do you think this ad fits Pfizer as a brand? Again, we link this to the more direct contextualization in the hug spot, namely showing, okay, these are two friends, they're able to be hugging each other again because of our vaccination effort and because we are trying to help people with our vaccines. It's very relatable. We can directly see the consequences of the huge vaccination campaign that's being rolled out right now, and it's actually helping viewers to directly allocate this spot as something that's fitting Pfizer as a brand, that's actually producing beneficial products for me myself. Just like with the brand image, we also inquired about some more parameters about the spots themselves. For example, did they have a clear message? Were they convincing? Were they touching? Were they credible for the audience? Again, we're seeing a very, very consistent pattern, namely a more positive one for the hard copy. I think what we've marked here in purple, the parameter is motivating. About 80% of the audience approves of the ad as being motivating, while this is only 65% of the audience for Science Will Win. So we're seeing very, very large increases for the more emotional approach, in this case, to come over as convincing to its audience. It comes over as more touching, obviously, because there's more emotion, even tears involved for the friends being able to hug each other again, which are, as we will see with the emotional data, quite important parameters in this case, since it's an issue that's touching all of us in this times of a global pandemic. What we also wanted to show with this study on the two different communication approaches is what impact does it have on viewers' vaccination attitudes. It's kind of a mixed image. We're seeing Science Will Win spots in light blue, the hug spot in purple, and we had a pre and post measurement of how likely are you going to get vaccinated against COVID-19 if it was possible for you. So while we're seeing that there is an increase in being likely to open to getting vaccinated for the Science Will Win spot, there's not so much increase, actually a slight decrease in openness regarding vaccination for the hug spot. However, we're already seeing that for the hug spot, the sample we used was very open regarding vaccination. So we call that a ceiling effect. We're seeing that it was almost 100% of the participants that were open, and they're not as likely to be changed again. While we see a slight increase actually for the Science Will Win spot in this case. We also saw other movements, namely on factors such as confidence in the vaccine, which were already higher in the group of the hug spot and compared to the one in the Science Will Win spot. But we're seeing basically an increase in all parameters about vaccination perception and vaccination motivation between the pre and post measurements on both spots. That should be it from my side regarding the data, and I will hand over to the emotional data analysis presented by Alex.
Thanks, Florian. So let's look at viewers' emotional response in a little bit more detail. So on this next slide, what we did here was connect the underlying emotional response. So based on facial movements through capture via the camera on a viewer's own device, we could get an understanding of the emotional pathway a respondent goes on whilst being exposed to the content. So if you look to the bottom left of this slide, you can see just in the first few seconds, what we've done here is show this breadth and depth of smiles in this instance that is occurring across the sample for the science edit. What we've then done, connecting that data to the I-squared data, is then look at skip behavior. And what we can see Interestingly, for the science edit, is that there's an important emotional moment early on, which will tend to determine whether you want to go through and watch more of that content, or whether you're actually just checking out and skipping early on. And when we look at that peak in smiles within the first few seconds, so the red dashed line there towards the bottom left, you can see that there's a group of viewers that are very emotionally positive about the saving human sentiment. So that saving human sentiment does something, grips them emotionally, that makes them want to stay longer. However, you can see there's another group of viewers that actually their emotional response remains flat throughout the first 6 or 7 seconds. And actually, if you're not gripping them with that immediate emotional hook there, then they're not going to stay around. They're not going to watch the rest of the content. And that's really, I think, one of the big advantages of this type of approach, is you can then start to get the full brain picture of putting together the emotion AI response from our data through to those behavioral, demographic, attitudinal measures from the YouTube context. So if we can move on to the next slide, we can then start to look in a little bit more detail about, okay, what was it about this content that actually motivated viewers to get vaccinated? As Florian showed you a few moments ago, there are a lot of positive attitudes already out there, which I think is really interesting. You know, you hear a lot of, or sometimes you hear negative stories in the press, but there's a big residual groundswell of positivity towards the vaccination programs. But what is it about these copies in particular that is really resonating and moving the needle amongst viewers to get motivated? Within the science edit that we're looking at here, you can see 2 lines on this graph. The lines again are the breadth and depth of the emotional intensity that's being felt throughout that particular viewing experience. So this is a forced exposure at this point. This is viewers watching the whole thing, and we're picking up on their emotional response. Interestingly here, when we look at brow furrow, which is the measure that we're looking at here, so that is literally the brows coming together. It's indicative of concentration, of high mental effort. Sometimes it can be confusion. Context is important here, but often it's a high amount of mental effort that the viewer is using. And what we thought was really interesting was that the science copy relied on mental effort to motivate viewers to go and get vaccinated. And we're particularly interested in where the lines diverge. And where the lines diverge, you can see there's a difference in response there. So something is happening, and it's in that blue box, where there's a group of viewers that are really concentrating here, and that's helping them get motivated. So the blue line are viewers that are motivated to get vaccinated, and the red line, all others that are less vaccinated, are not furrowing their brow in those particular moments. And so when we look at what's happening there, it's the reference to just ask the ones it's already beaten. So that reference to the historic success of previous vaccination campaigns. So if you make reference to that and you engage the viewer sufficiently to focus in, then that is actually really motivating. But obviously, not everyone is going to focus in, pick up on that nuance, and be motivated by it. So next, I look at the hug copy on the next slide, because that's working very, very differently, as you would imagine. So it's in many ways a more simple emotional tug for the hug copy, but there are some important nuances in terms of how it works. So again, we've got the dashed blue line, which is the viewers that have endorsed the statement through survey that this copy is motivating them to get vaccinated, versus the red line, those less motivated. And what you see here is on our joy measure, is that actually you get that lift in smiles much earlier for those that are then being motivated to go and get vaccinated. So there's obviously a group of viewers here that, you know, as soon as they can see that this is about a hug, that positivity comes right up and out. And actually, you know, that being full of joy is a strong motivating dynamic within this particular copy. So it's not concentrating, listening to the story, you know, engaging the more considered brain. Actually, there is something really visceral and immediate about that hug. But if we move on to the next slide, there is an important nuance to this. So it's not just unbridled joy and positivity that is actually a motivating dynamic here emotionally. Because interestingly, when we look here, again, motivated in blue, less motivated in pink, but this measure is what we call lip corner depress. It's the lips cornering down. Think of it as a reverse smile, it's sadness, it's melancholic responses. And actually that in the latter stages is also helping motivate. So it's not just about the happiness from the hug. Actually, what's the motivating trigger is a more immediate expression of joy, but then afterwards, where we get the transition to that white screen, it's just a trigger or a spark of sadness, probably pointing to that, underlying longing. So if you're being touched with joy and then sadness, that's what's really motivating you or motivating viewers to go out and get vaccinated. Okay. So then I think if we move on to the next slide, I think that's back to you, Florian.
Yep, that's back to me. Thanks. We've almost reached the end. We did a quick recap, and essentially what we've been trying to show today is that emotional topics, such as vaccination against the backdrop of a global pandemic, as we're seeing now, they should be emotionally addressed. And especially in this case, we've seen that the positive contextualization and the positive presentation that's been used within the hug spot has been a lot more successful for Pfizer in this case. Essentially, what's been the key point for Pfizer in this case was that they presented potential benefits within a positively charged context. And as Alex already said, it was a more direct route and a clearer route in the end for the audience to understand that by using Pfizer products, they're actually being helped and they can see the benefits of those products clearer, more directly than that they were presented in the Science Will Win copy. I hope it was a bit interesting for you to see what we did with our case study. We've already reached the end. If you want to get in touch with us, please do so. You see my contact information. You see Alex ones as well. Please get in touch with us. And yeah, that's been it so far from my side. I think we've already had some questions in the Q&A part, right?
We have, yes, we have. There's one good one here about regarding the vaccine readiness. Does the 13% difference in pre-willingness suggest an inherent difference between the groups?
Yes, it does actually. What we're seeing, we will actually be continuing field work with this, as we want to let's say gain a bit more sample in order to have more participants to show. Yes, that is a difference in the sample that's been used. And we are also seeing that because of this difference, actually, I think it was the hotspot being having participants that were more willing to vaccines already. We're seeing that the impact the ad has on vaccine readiness isn't as big as for the Science Will Win copy, which actually had less openness and readiness for vaccine before they saw the ad. So yes, we would actually allocate this as a something that's already existed before the questionnaire within the samples.
Sure.
I've also seen questions, I think, regarding the brand react. I will just go back to that slide. The first question was, why did we go for, I think it's about the keyboards, keys we're using. This is actually because we're doing this in a lot of countries, so we're not doing this in only English-speaking countries, which would be Y for yes and N for no, but we're using the ones that are more to the outer parts of the keyboard, so they are easy to reach and also easy to press as we're trying to have participants answer the questions as quickly as possible in order to understand their gut feeling. Also, regarding the brand trick, we've had a question regarding the brand image map. In this case, yes, we've only been doing that for Pfizer because we've been interested in Pfizer, and also we didn't have so much time to present all of the results we've been seeing. But of course, we have a big benchmark data ready for this, so we can line this up against other competitor brands in order to see differences. We could also do this for, as it was, I think it's Moderna, it's AstraZeneca, and lay these implicit image results of Pfizer against those that we're seeing, for example, for AstraZeneca. Another question I've been seeing was about the playback share. I will just quickly get into that. Yes, you're exactly right. The shorter the ad, the higher the playback share. So we've been seeing that Huck was actually watched for about 15 seconds, but because the ad is only 20 seconds long, as opposed to the 71 seconds, I think, for Science Will Win, we're seeing that the playback share is significantly larger for the Huck spot. And also, this addresses a question that we haven't really talked about in this case study, as we don't have so much time. But we always say that a higher playback share is more important, as in this case we're also seeing that the branding for Pfizer was very late and very late at the spot. I think the last 5 to 8 seconds, something like that. So it's important to retain viewers and users, of course, until the very end of the spot in this case. There's another question about the polarization in the US regarding the vaccine. Actually, a good one. Until now, we've been having a total sample of about 200 participants. So if we were to split those by political affinity or urban versus rural participants, or let's say even regions through the US, we didn't do that because the splits on that would be too low. We do have splits in preparation for people that are saying, okay, I'm ready to get vaccinated versus those that aren't ready to get vaccinated, but we're still waiting for enough participants to be coming in to do valid results on that and actually to have valid data on that. But sure, we're able to do that, and we're actually trying to do that as much as possible with the data we're seeing. Maybe something else. I'll just go through the data. There was one about the the expectancy on the ads, and actually I was surprised by the results we're seeing as well, to the extent that the Science Will Win copy, it was quite dramatic and quite cineastic, wasn't it? The way it was produced was very well. It had very quick cuts. It showed everything it needed, but in the end, we saw that the more, maybe the easier or the less dynamic and to the point approach used in Huck in this sense was more successful and more effective in conveying the message Pfizer wanted to convey with their communication.
Yeah, there was another question that came in too. Apart from the more emotional approach to the hug spot, I think you might have touched on this, but can you talk about some of the other reasons why it might have performed better?
Yep. So what we focused on with today's case study was mainly showing the two different parts of emotionalization. There's also much more to it. I've already shortly spoken to the more YouTube-like aspects of the video. So what we're always seeing is that different media formats, media environments, for example, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, or YouTube, they also demand for different cuts of ads and also different representation of ads. So, for example, what we might be seeing is that the big cinema-like creative used in Science Will Win might actually perform better on big screens such as TVs, because it's more effective, it's more dramatic in its way, while we might be seeing that the Huck approach, which is actually more kind of POV-like, it seems like it's been filmed with the camera from one's POV, might actually be more suitable for YouTube in that sense, as it's closer to the content we're actually seeing on YouTube in many cases. So we haven't studied that given the limited time frame we're having today, but that might be an effect that's been cause of the effectiveness and differences in results as well.
We've got just about a minute left here. I don't know if you want to do any closing remarks or take one more quick question.
I think that's been it from my side, Alex. If you want to add something, I will present the last slide just to do a quick reminder of who we are, what we wanted to show you today. I hope it was interesting for you guys. I've seen quite a huge audience from Egypt, Colombia, the US, Germany. So yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us.
No, I would echo Florian's sentiments exactly. I think just on that last point on the differences between the executions, I think the hug spot, it's just that there's something more universal and immediate and short. And, as much as many of us like to, rationalize about it, read data, read stats, actually, I've been, locked away for a year or over a year, actually just to see those immediate moments, which we can all immediately relate to, I think is just really, really compelling. Even for the more cynical amongst us, I think it often will touch you somewhere. But no, echoing everything Florian said. So thank you everyone for your interest and your engagement, and more than happy to pick up any further discussions separately.
Yeah, thanks. Well, that's about all we have time for today. So thanks again to our presenters, and thanks to all of you out there for taking time to be with us. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.